So once the pandemic hit and people started talking about people really started leaning into history, especially with cops murdering people like
Yep.
Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. So I was like, okay, I'll take all the stuff and the interviews I was doing on my blog and make it into a podcast. Like one thing that I realized in doing this work and like doing history research is just how much history is through a white lens.
What up, though, Black Friday family? Welcome back to another installment of the Black Fridays podcast. Now, before we get into today's episode, make sure that you go hit that like button, subscribe, send the episode to a friend, and then make sure that you also following us and streaming the episodes on all the major streaming platforms and YouTube. Now that I got that out the way, this is a super, extremely special episode because this is my first time doing an in-person interview outside of the state of Michigan, more importantly, Detroit, which is where, we talk about so many amazing guests and people that we had come here before. But I'm actually, as you can see, it's a different setup, different layout. I'm in New York. I'm in the heart of the city in Times Square, and I had to pull up on Toya from Harlem. How you doing today?
I'm good. I feel special. I'm your first out-of-state interview.
For sure, and we appreciate it. We appreciate you definitely pulling up to the podcast. And so, Toya, you are a content creator. You're a podcaster, the creator of That Wasn't in My Textbook,
Yes.
and then also the homie historian is what I'm coining one of your nicknames.
Yeah, I have you're a historian homie, Anthony Bourdain of history. I got a little tagline.
There we go. There we go.
Yes.
So how did this come to be in terms of your creator journey, so to speak, and developing such a platform like That Wasn't in My Textbook, something that has been consumed all over the world and more importantly over the country, over 80,000 downloads, which is insane. And how did this even start?
Yeah, so it started originally the blogging days. The blogging days was the early 2000s or maybe 2010-ish, right? People were blogging. So I started out as a blog originally and it was called Harlem and Beyond. I think I started that 2013, 2014. And it really started because I had gone away for grad school. And it was I had to go away for 8 months and work and take classes online. It was a remote program. And I lived in Miami, which was fun. But during that time, I came back to Harlem and it had changed so much. And I was it's 8 months and this is crazy. And so I was inspired because I was I could smell the gentrification in the air. And so I was just okay, before some other person comes here and starts highlighting Harlem, I want to highlight it as a Harlem native. And I want to highlight the history that's being erased in the name of gentrification. And so it became a digital archive. And then from there, I was okay, Toya from Harlem and Beyond is kind of really pigeonholing me because I was I want to travel. I think I want to move out of state. So then I changed it to Toya from Harlem, which are my personal handles on social. I'm sorry, I hit the mic. Which are my personal handles on social. And then I moved to LA. And then when I was in LA, the pandemic happened. And also people stopped really reading, blogging kind of died. And it was podcasts and social media and social media reels just happened. And I was really reluctant to start a podcast because I was just I don't want to start a new thing, but I needed to kind of grow and evolve. And so once the pandemic hit and people started talking about people really started leaning into history, especially with cops murdering people like Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. So I was okay, I'll take all the stuff and the interviews I was doing on my blog and make it into a podcast. And so yeah, that's how it came to be.
And then when the podcast started to gain traction and get so much exposure, what was that like for you in terms of navigating that? Because I know that you probably did it out of a passion, but then when it actually turned into something that really resonated with people, what was that experience like for you?
I think it felt good because when I started my podcast, it was the first time that I felt this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I never knew what my passion was. I've had different interests in life. And I think when I dropped the first episode on Juneteenth in 2020, and then I started just building episodes and interviewing people, I was like, ooh, like it feels different. Like it feels like something that I'm supposed to be doing. It's not easy, but it felt like, okay, like this is fun. Mm-hmm. So that process was good. And I think it was just like validating to know like, okay, I'm not the only person who like enjoys history and Black history, and then also history, like pop culture, right? Because I think a lot of times we think about history just in terms of like genocide and slavery, which is very much a part of Black history in America. But on my podcast, I try to also just talk about like other things and like current events. So it was just really nice to see that people were really vibing with it. And it was like, okay, I can keep going, you know, and like people like talking about the history of cannabis, people like talking about the history of Black Barbie, like people like talking about all histories. And I think a lot of times, you know, with education, it can be like really uptight. Yeah. And like, you know, when you think of historian, you probably think of some like old white guy. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, not just me, but like you, and like there's so many other content creators who are focusing on like Black businesses, Black culture, and we're really kind of reframing what a historian is, what history is, how it can be taught. It can be fun. It can be cursing. You know what I mean? Like it can be about, like history is a very large topic. So it just felt good.
And I know you're a history buff, but what made you at what point did you say, I want to take history and essentially flip it on its head, and I want to give this a lens from a Black woman from Harlem, from the city, and be able to give it to people, present it to people in that way?
Yeah, well, in college, I went to college at Wesleyan University, and I got my BA in African American Studies. So I think that kind of influenced me. But then when I like really think about it, because I think people ask me this question a lot, and I'm like, when did like my history thing happen, and like when did I decide to flip it? But I think all my early education was rooted from like Black people who started schools who wanted students, like, you know, like I grew up in Harlem, so it's just like Black and Latino students, and they wanted us to know about ourselves and have teachers that look like us. So I think those foundational things, like going to those type of schools early on and being surrounded by people who look like me and being taught by people who look like me, and then like also learning about myself and like all different cultures of people of color 365, I think that really impacted me. And so it caused me to want to do the history. And then to flip it on my head, I was just like, in order for me to continue doing this, I don't want to present history the way it was presented to me, like in academic worlds. Like I want this to be fun. I want to like break it down. I want to like just really, I wanted to be the class I wish I had, you know? And so I always say like, Mom, that was in my textbook, it was the history class you never knew you always wanted to take. And so that's just like how I think about it. But it's so interesting because I think even when I write scripts and stuff, I find myself, like I feel like I'm so conditioned to like write in a certain way, like in academia, like you have a thesis and then you have this, this, and this. Yeah. So oftentimes I have to like write my script and then I have to go back and be like, okay, how would you really say this? Right, like, you know what I mean? Like you don't need a transitional sentence for everything or word. Yeah. Like what would be your way of saying? So sometimes I feel like I'm like uncode switching myself.
Yeah, no, that's real. I definitely experienced that, especially early on in my podcast journey, and even trying to do solo episodes, which I commend you for, because I have done like literally 1 or 2 solo episodes, including my podcast intro before my first episode. And yeah, no, not necessarily a fan of it. I want to retry it, but no, I don't know how you.
Solos are my favorite.
Okay.
Because I feel like I can just go off, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like I don't have to worry. And I still do an outline. I don't know if you do like an outline or whatever. Maybe that would help. But I'm like, I love solo episodes, and then I can keep them short too. Okay. But
you don't realize how much you. We will, because you don't realize how much you talk by yourself, and then you'll think like, man, I'm going in, like I've been talking forever, and it's been like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's the most shocking thing about my podcast is like my solo episodes are the most popular. And I've had some really cool. I think, you know, obviously one of the marketing strategies of podcast is to have guests and to have like other podcasters. And I think that absolutely works. But I was really surprised to see like some of my most popular episodes are just me by myself. And I think it's because of the length and it's like a little more to the point maybe.
Yeah, that's dope.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to have some fun on Black Fridays, which is called Freestyle Fridays.
feel nervous.
I mean, you can't call yourself Toya from Harlem if you ain't got no bars. So
Okay.
we're gonna need you to.
Well, I got to rap?
Yeah, you gotta rap.
Are you serious?
No, I'm
okay.
not saying.
I was like, okay, I can do this. I can rhyme a little. Okay.
No, you don't have to rap. It's,
Okay.
it's a random assortment of questions. They're all about you. So
Okay.
we just need you to answer each one and answer honestly.
Okay.
All right. So what is the best borough in New York?
Harlem. And it's not a borough. But
I was going to say Harlem is not a borough.
But you can never tell a Harlem person that.
No, you can't.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
For geographically, for the people who don't know much about New York or haven't been here, where is Harlem in the boroughs?
Harlem is at the upper tip of Manhattan.
And then what are the 5 boroughs?
Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Long Island.
Okay.
They don't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's funny you say that because I was just talking to some New Yorkers and they were like, yeah, we only claim 4 of them. They were like, it's 5 boroughs, we claim 4.
Yeah.
So what's y'all beef with Staten Island?
It's an island. It's weird.
It's not.
The accents are awful. You know?
Can you do a Staten Island accent?
I will never. Never. Can't even try. It's like Staten Island and Boston accents up there together.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I've literally just walked through Harlem like some blocks in the past, but never spent any time there. Could you paint the picture of what Harlem is like for anybody who hasn't been there?
What it's like now? It's a little more white. What is Harlem like? That's hard. I mean, it's like it's still predominantly Black. So you'll see like mostly Black people walking around. You'll see a lot of like families. There's a lot of families. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of like really nice local businesses. I just posted about Black-owned cafes. So there's still like, even within the gentrification, there are still community hubs that people are creating and holding on to.
Okay.
And so like, there's a lot of Black-owned cafes, a lot of community places. There's a lot of Black-owned restaurants. It's really hard to describe. That's a hard one. You have to come.
Okay, and
you
just
have to come and
experience the essence.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a little pissed because me and my wife, we watched the show Harlem, and the show has nothing to do with Harlem, really. It's just about a group of friends that just happen to be in Harlem. But outside that, it's nothing really has to do with Harlem. And I'm like, it's a missed opportunity here, but I digress as far as that goes.
I have comments about that.
For sure. For sure. And I see that you like to get out and travel. You're an experienced traveler. What's one of your favorite places to go?
Okay. Well, if I keep it local, because I think we always think about travel, we think about like getting
abroad,
getting a passport stamp. So I love Chicago.
Okay.
Chicago summers in particular. I haven't been there for the winter.
So in Detroit, old school Detroiters call it Chicago. Now, where the R come from, I don't know.
Chicago?
They say Chicago. They pronounce it Chicago.
Oh.
But they're saying in their mind Chicago.
Oh.
But yeah,
okay.
I just a tidbit for you.
So I really like Chicago in the summer. Really love that. International. I like London.
Okay.
I really like London. I think it's like kind of like a cleaner, more international New York.
Okay.
And then I like any Caribbean islands. Like take me to a beach with blue water. I'm good.
Yeah.
And like predominantly Black island would be preferred, but I can thrive anywhere.
Okay. So I'm assuming you're a reader.
Yes.
What do you like to read, or what's a book that you would recommend people read?
I'm really into novels. My reading has been slacking though this year. I have a goal of reading one book a month, and I have not read one yet. But it's February. I haven't finished. I'm halfway through one book.
Right.
Books to read. I'm trying to think of what I've read. I just finished at the end of last year. I finished Sky Full of Elephants. Okay. And I really love that book. I can see it being turned into a movie. I'm currently reading Love Lyric, which is, I think it's by Christina Forrest. It just came, her pub day came out. I got like an early advance copy on Kindle, and I love it. It's like a romance book. Sometimes I feel like a cheesy romance book can kind of just like, or like an easy read can get you back out of like a reading rut. Okay. So that's where I'm at.
Interesting. Well, thank you for partaking in Freestyle Fridays.
It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad.
I really thought I was gonna have to rap. I was ready.
I was
like, I can rhyme, Latoya. You just have to rhyme the last word of each line. It's fine.
Got you. Exactly. Yeah, we all can. Yeah, it's in the DNA.
Exactly.
So I would love to be able to talk more about podcasting. So that wasn't in my textbook. Like you said, there's a lot on the back end, and we even talked before we started recording about what it takes to actually curate a show. And so I just wanted to know if you could, number one, for anybody who hasn't heard that wasn't in my textbook or hasn't had a chance to experience it, could you paint the picture for them of what they can expect when they do listen? And then in addition to that, if you could talk about what is your behind the scenes process as to piecing that whole thing together, because I'm sure it's a lot of research that goes into it.
Yeah, so I'm coming out of a hiatus right now, so I'm very excited for that. And for the podcast, there's so much that goes into it. The first part of your question, can you remind me of the first part of your question?
So paint the picture for if you listen to it.
So usually I start off the episode with like a fun fact, right? So if it's like an episode that's coming out is the history of how Black people speak. So I'll do a little fun fact about that, which is like at one point, you know, public schools, they were voting for public schools to teach what they were calling like Ebonics, right? So that's like a little fun fact. And then I'll do kind of like what I call like church announcements. Okay. And if you're Black, you know what those are. Like a little housekeeping, like letting you know this is the history class you always wanted to take, all the subscribe things, the things that you're in for. And I also explain like the structure of the show. Like what's the sermon, right? So it's usually just the first, if I have a guest, and in this episode I do, with guest episodes, I usually do like the first 5 to 10 minutes. It's just me solo giving you like some facts and some receipts so that when you jump into the interview, you're informed. Okay. So then I'll plop in the interview with whoever the expert is. And in this case, it's 2 authors who wrote the book Historical Black Phrases. It's like 100 historical Black phrases or something like that. And so then I'll insert the interview, and we usually do like definitions, like how do you define how Black people speak? Like how would you describe that? And then I'll just ask questions that kind of highlight the history and what people say. And then I end it with like an outro, which is like another housekeeping of just a reflection. I call it like Toya's tidbits of just like what I thought from the research to the interview. And then telling people to come back for the next one. And I do bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks. Okay. And then like you say, you're coming out of a hiatus. Yes. So I'm interested to dive into that a little bit, because I was going to make a video, and I probably still will, and put it out to ask people who formerly podcasted, why did you stop your show, or why aren't you currently recording? Because, you know, it's so many. I was talking to a fellow podcaster on one of my previous episodes, and we were just talking about how from the Detroit lens, we had a lot of great shows in the period where like podcasts were booming, like from 2015 to let's say 18, 19-ish. And then a lot of them just dropped off and fell off the face of the map. And so was curious as to like how did you end up at that point to stop recording, and then what's getting you back into it? Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I'd known. There's a stat, you should like put it in this episode, but there's a stat of like, because people are like, oh, there's so many podcasts. And that's true, there are. But then I think it's like over 50 or 60, maybe even 70% don't make past like 3 episodes, or even like the first season, which is like I don't know how many episodes are in the season. That's really up to you. Right. So that's like something I've seen a lot, and I think it's like really important. For me, the hiatus happened just because life was lifing. You know, I had like a really rough like 2024 personally, and I had like relocated and I got laid off and like all this stuff. And, you know, I had an editor who I had paid, and like I was just overwhelmed. So I was just like, let me just take this off my plate instead of like keep on saying I'm going to release an episode every 2 weeks and not doing it and disappointing myself and my audience. I'm going to just stop. But I knew I was going to get back into it, right? So what's bringing me back is just kind of what I was speaking to earlier. Like I do feel, as cheesy as it may sound, that it's like my calling to teach in this capacity and to like share this knowledge and information. And I feel like I'm really good at it. I can get better. I'm not like the best, but I feel like I like it and I'm good at it. So I'm just working on rebuilding that muscle. It's like if you're like out of the gym, or if you haven't written in a long time, it's just like getting back into it. So I'm just, I think this is like a personal motivation. And then people also have been asking me about it too, which people are great and I appreciate that. But like more so, I have to be motivated internally to do it, because I know the work that it takes. So I think it's more so just like me feeling like, okay, I feel like I've processed my rough 2024, and like I'm ready. My creative juices are flowing, and I'm ready to like get back in there. And so what about your process in terms of getting back into the groove, and what does that look like? Because like you said, previously you had an editor, and then of course you have to do a lot of research for the stuff that you make. So give us a behind the scenes of what your process is like. Still a little chaotic. I'm still figuring it out, to be honest. But I usually it's like I have like a running note of like topics, potential topics, and then sometimes people give me topics and I put it all on there, and then from there I'll like do an outline or a script. Like I'll do an outline, and then from the outline I'll do the script, and then I'll also just do some research of like, are there people already talking about this, right? So are there podcasters or just other people online or doctors like talking about this subject that would be able to add to this conversation, or is this going to be a solo episode? And then from there I'll like contact the person, or if it's multiple people I'll contact them and like figure out schedules, which is a whole another skill in and of itself. But one thing I have learned is that people are super receptive to like being podcast guests. I have not had a no, I don't think.
Okay.
You know, like maybe it's like not right now, but never really a no. It's like free promo.
Okay.
You know,
I've gotten a few, or people not responding. I'm holding that grudge still.
Yeah. But no. I mean, you should, and they will regret it. So, and I've had a couple like circle back, and then I've circled back and they haven't said anything. But most of the time it's been like a yes. So that's been good. And then, you know, I'll interview the person and then I'll put everything together. So I'll rewatch the interview, go over my script. That's like the beginning part, the history part, to figure out, is anything repeated or is there anything I need to mention that's going to be highlighted in the episode that people are going to be like, what does this mean? So then I like piece, it's like a puzzle. So then I piece it all together. And then, so then I'll record my interview, my part with the history and the sermon and the housekeeping stuff, and then I'll listen to the episode, the interview, and figure out if I just want to put the whole thing in there, if I want to edit it, and then I'll do my outro. And you know, with my hiatus, I'm gonna change the order a little bit and try to kind of insert the interview a little bit more like sooner with like the history part. So, or even just doing some pre-recorded things. I'm gonna experiment with like some formats that will make the editing afterwards easier and also make it a better experience for the listeners. Okay.
And then you're going to preview your first episode for us right now, right?
I just kind of did. I told you the fun facts. I told you everything.
No, I mean like hit play. Play the episode.
No, it's not ready. I wish. It should be.
So do you have any, I'm interested to know, how do you figure out how to extract the most interesting things about the topics that you talk about? Because I think that you do a really good job at that. And so I'm wondering, is there a process to cut all the information down and like, this is going to be what the people want to know about because it interested me, or like what's that like?
It's really hard, I think, because I'm like, I'm not good at like editing. Like I'm very long-winded. Like when I do reels, like, you know, reels are only like 90 seconds. And I have like such a hard time. I'm like, what do I keep out? Especially with history, because it's like so important. But then I'm like, okay, I'm not a professor, you know, and I'm not trying to be a professor. I'm just like your historian homie. So it's just like, I'm just giving you the cliff notes.
Got you.
So what's the, like, what, when I read it, or if I tell my friends, I'll tell my friend, I'll tell my mom, I'm like, you think this is interesting? Like, would you want to know that? You know what I mean? Like, because there is so much information. So I try to just find like the juiciest ones, or ones that like will really stick in your mind that you're like, oh, okay, you know, and it takes a lot of work, but I try. And I also try to forget, I'm like, you don't have to tell people everything. You know, it's kind of like the whole turning history on its head. It's like, I have 30, sometimes if I do a solo episode, I try to keep it at 25 minutes to 45 minutes to just teach you something. And if you learn one thing, that's fine. And I try to remind myself that when I have like these 20-page scripts. But yeah, I just try to, and I'm like, okay, this is the history class you never knew you wanted to take. So what would you want to know? You know what I mean? Like, what is too much and what just right?
Got you. Out of all the research that you do, what is the most interesting history fact that you've found out about any historical figure, event? What's something that you were like, damn, that's really cool, or it just really intrigued you when you're deep in your research?
Okay, I have two things. One that answers the question and one that kind of doesn't.
Okay, all right.
So the first is like, one thing that I realized in doing this work and like doing history research is just how much history is through a white lens.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like when I did the history of surfing, you know, finding finding information about Black people's impact on certain things is like really hard. Like a lot of stuff starts around like Greek people or like medieval times, and it's hard to find it doesn't mean that it exists and some of it exists, but it's like one book or something. And I think that's a part of like colonialism.
Mhm.
It's like erasing history, right? And so or like a lot of things with the surfing episode, it was like, oh, the first surfer was observed by a white man
Mhm.
and he saw it in Senegal.
Mhm.
And so like understanding like even the history of history
Mhm.
is written by the colonizers.
Okay.
And nothing is official because nothing's not, and like certain things aren't official unless like a white person saw it and wrote it in a book that
Mhm.
still exists or we have a copy of today.
Yeah.
And that really frustrates me. It makes it hard for me when I'm like trying to look for evidence.
Yeah.
Or like trying to make sure things are accurate.
Mhm.
So that's one surprising thing. I think, there's so many things that I've learned. I think we're about to be in tax season, so I'm like in the taxes. I did a history of tax episode and how like
featuring Wesley Snipes.
No. I wish it was a tax episode with I forgot her name, but I think it's Dorothy something. She is a professor. She talks about like taxes, like and like tax law, and just like how taxes are racist, and just like the statistics around that, like, and just the structure of things that are inhibiting us. So like, if that inhibit even like union, right? So most of the time, unfortunately, due to like systematic racism, Black people have more college debt, right?
Yep.
So when it comes to taxes, when you file as a single person, you get like a tax write-off for your interest, but it's capped. So no matter how much your debt is, I think you only get like $1,500.
Okay.
Which is kind of ridiculous,
yeah,
right? Because you pay more interest than that if you have larger debt.
Yep.
But if you're married and you both have student loan debt, they still cap it at $1,500. And so who do you think that impacts the most? Black people who have the most student loan debt because of like disparities in pay and all these other things and living conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's like one thing that like stood out to me of just like structurally, like when we talk about racism, not in terms of like comments, but just like in terms of what's ingrained in systems in society that we have to participate in. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is there anything that you wish was in your textbook back in the day? If you think about young Toya that you discovered, like, man, they should have told us this back in the day.
Every episode that's on my podcast. No. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot. I think a lot of like Black neighborhoods and towns. I wish there was just more on that. There was like so many thriving communities that were erased in terms of gentrification, and then we created new ones, and now we're seeing it happen all over again. So I think that would just be nice to learn about, like, after, Reconstruction, all that other stuff, like what were these pockets of like thriving Black communities? Like we learn about the massacres that ended them.
Right.
But we don't learn
we
about
don't talk enough about
like who lived there, what were they doing, like how much money were they making, like what was nightlife like Duke Ellington came there, that's cool, like you know what I mean, like I think just showing what these towns were like before, and like
they were decimated.
Decimated, and making them like making these people who existed human, like there was a woman that lived there. This is what she did. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so in Detroit, we experienced that. Well, I didn't, but the city experienced that with Black Bottom. So they literally built a freeway over that neighborhood. And then now they're like, we're going to shut down the freeway and rebuild the neighborhood there. It's just like, all right, whatever.
And who's going to live there?
Correct. And so, and then in Seattle, when I lived out there, I learned that it was the Central District. And so now that area is getting gentrified. However, Black people are starting to seemingly come back into that neighborhood and reinvest in that space.
What's it called?
The Central District.
Okay.
And the geography of Seattle, I can't exactly remember.
Yes.
But it's almost like pretty much, it's not too far from like Space Needle, that downtown area. So yeah, that when you mentioned that made me think of those two, and it's so many cities like that in the country, Tulsa.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we just know about the Tulsa massacre.
Exactly. Nobody told it was slapping back in the day.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean. Like, would I want to hang out there at night?
Exactly.
Like just one night. I mean, I know it's still hard, probably walking around, but like I think there's a lot of like lit neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And communities that existed. And I would like to know.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I got a potential business idea for you. I'm going to save it until later, but I thought of another one. You could start a platform where you could use AI to take yourself back in the day and, and hang out in these neighborhoods?
Black people gonna be like, nah, the KKK's around the corner. I'm good.
Facts. That's when they be like, if you had the opportunity to time travel, would you go in the past, the future? Take me in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I just did the Denver 5 Point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I would maybe want to spend one night, like, you know, like if they were like James Brown is
coming the 5 Point neighborhood,
in Denver, like it's like if James Brown was coming to this neighborhood that one night,
right?
But like I wouldn't want to live there. I don't want to go back I want to go back in time for like an experience.
Yes,
but not for indefinitely. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like it's not safe.
Right. Exactly. And we got more tools nowadays, so yeah. So if you could put your content creator hat on, because you've had the opportunity to leverage your brand from That Wasn't My Textbook, and then also your own personal brand that you built on social media in order to create opportunities for yourself and pay opportunities as well, which is amazing. So if you could kind of talk about when did you understand or realize that was an avenue for you to be able to get paid for your creativity?
Okay, just preference. I'm not getting paid a lot of money, y'all. Okay, I just started.
You getting paid though?
I'm just starting.
You getting paid?
I think just like seeing other creators talking about it really, and like meeting, like we used to be mentored by Lloyd.
Yes,
like, I think just like talking to other creators and other creators being really transparent online about, I got this brand deal, like, and I'm like, okay, so just like absorbing all that information kind of helped me figure out that there's a possibility. And like I said, I'm very new. I'm kindergarten brand deal making, so I'm still learning, because I think there's two different parts to content creation. There's like the creativity, which is like coming up with the concept and shooting the stuff. And I think I have that down. That's like, I'm brolic in that area. And then I feel like I'm super weak in
you gotta go sell it.
Like in the business mind and the thinking ahead and the establishing relationships. Like you asked me to shoot a video, I could do that. You asked me to send 10 emails to somebody, I'm like, I mean, I can do it, but like, why are they not responding? So I think that's just like seeing other people sharing and being transparent about it, and like having friends being like, oh, I got this, and like sharing those tools too, being like, oh, write this email. So people have been like really helpful, and I'm just like still figuring it out.
And what has it been like building that creator community, so to speak? Because like you said, we were part of Lloyd's mentorship program about how to leverage your brand to get deals and opportunities. And then also, I know that you go to a lot of different podcast-focused events or creator-focused events. And so how do you kind of build that Rolodex of other creators and have that community?
Yeah, I think networking can like be such a weird word, you know? So I just try to go to different events and like learn, and then I just try to connect with like one person. Okay. Because I get like easily overwhelmed anyway. For sure. And I'm like, I just want, like, even if I connect with one or two people, have a genuine connection, can follow up with them, I'm just gonna take that journey. So that's what I've just been doing. I've just been like, especially now, like I came back from LA to New York, and so it's easier to get around, and it's like a lot more things happening like closer together. So I just kind of been like on my LinkedIn, I've been like on my Zooms, like, you know, like on LinkedIn, on like when people share newsletters and resources, just like really kind of tapping in and trying my best to do like one or two social, well, really just like one a week. You know, it's wintertime, so it's a little harder, but just like being like, okay, I have to dedicate time on and offline to create the life that I want to live.
Are there any opportunities that stand out for you in terms of you, where it's like, man, this was amazing, I couldn't have seen this coming, and this is just dope platform for me or opportunity? Yeah,
well, it wasn't like crazy. Like I went to a creative event like last week, and I just sat down next to this one girl, and we were like talking the whole time. And she's like, I do education content. We exchange LinkedIn and Instagram and stuff. And then she literally hit me like the next day and was like, can you do this intro video for our Black History series? And I was like, for a check. And I was like, okay, like, you know, and like, so I think just stuff like that is like cool. Like I did not think this like sitting down talking to her would lead to that. And we just like generally just talked about what we did, but I wasn't like pitching to her or anything like that. And I think like, you know, establishing like relationships with people and letting them see your work speak for itself is like a very overlooked thing. And it's like hard to do because you're like, how do I find these people? Yeah. So that's one. And then last year, it was like my first brand deal. Like I've been doing social for a long time. last year was like my first paid brand deal. And it was with KCRW's podcast. And it was seamless. It was like, they do like a music history podcast. And they asked me to do like a sit down video. I do like a lot of sit down videos, highlighting one of their episodes and encouraging people to listen because my podcast is on a hiatus. And so I just did an episode about how Fela found Afrobeat in LA. And that I learned something. And then it was like really cool to do that and to like work with other people and get like feedback. So that was probably like the most shocking. It was like the most exciting highlight of 2024.
Nice.
For me.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I heard you talk in the episode that you did with Lloyd where you essentially talked about brand deals, opportunities, and like how you weren't really afraid. I know you said you feel like you could do better, but you weren't afraid to basically send out emails and tell people like, hey, I this person, present yourself and say, figure out how we might be able to work together. So how do you, I guess, kind of work up the courage to be able to do that? And then is there kind of like any tips or tricks of the trade for any content creators or people who are seeking brand deals and opportunities like that they may be able to use?
Yeah, I think I use it a lot with my podcast, like with getting guests, like as I try to get like bigger guests. It's just like, I think it's a quote that I've heard. It was like, don't say no to yourself first before someone says no to you, So it's like, it doesn't hurt. Like, it can be uncomfortable and like, sometimes you don't hear back and you have to send follow-ups. But I think just like, if you want to do anything, you have to be uncomfortable a little bit. And so I just try my best. And I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about if this person says yes, like how amazing this would be. So like, I'm going to keep following up. And like a lot of times people want to help you. Like I think we don't think that people want to help you or we think people are going to find us annoying. And it's like actually the opposite sometimes, So I just try to put that at the forefront of my mind, especially like with podcast episodes or brand deals. Like I'm like, I know this is going to be good. I know I'm good at what I do. You just need to like get on board.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's not easy at all. And like you said, you may not hear back and you can hold grudges like me, but I'm also getting better at identifying that. I don't really hold grudges as much anymore, but you identify that, number one, people have lives, so you don't know what's going on or where you may, when people say, oh, this email finds you well, I might not be well. So you never, actually, I'm down bad, but no, you don't know where that email could actually find them or however you reached out. So it's definitely a process to it. And then for me, I kind of have like a 2-time reach out rule, especially if we already have only two, because if I got to do it, it depends. Okay. If we have an established rapport or relationship to a certain extent, I'll do 2 times because, and then also I'll go based off of how it's received, because if I don't get anything or if I kind of get little to nothing, then I'm not going to invest too much time into it. And I kind of got to do it for my mental as well, just because if it's like I keep going and then it's just like nothing, or they kind of playing me to the side, then I'm gonna start getting mad. So I'm like, I got to keep it at a minimum to be able to reel myself in and to not take it personally.
Yes.
So that's kind of my experience in doing that. But I definitely need to do a lot more of it, because like I said, when you got here before we started recording, that the principles that we learned from Lloyd, I think that you have been doing a good job at actually applying those, because you have to put it into practice.
Yeah, I think I need to do a better job. Like I think somebody said they were emailing someone for a year.
Yeah, that's
and
real.
I'm like, I got to start doing that.
That's real.
You got to be persistent. And then also you have to start showing the work that you want them to hire you for.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm missing that I'm trying to do now is like, okay, if you want to get a desk, you got to show your office or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or if you want to get anything.
Be creative.
Yeah, you got to like show these elements of like what you're capable of doing for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because like if you want a brand deal with a certain company, and let's say they play you to the left, go work with their competitor, or reach out to the competitor,
or create the content anyway.
Create the content anyway, and then if a certain guest that you might want to have, and they say no or don't really respond, then you try to get somebody next to them, and then you may even get better content that way as well. So you never know. You got to get creative in these spaces also. So I digress. We could talk about that all day long, but you got to get up out of here soon. So I want to ask you, what's in your crystal ball for Toya? You talked about it a little bit for us in terms of the podcast. Very happy that it's coming back. But what do you see on the horizon for yourself? What's next for the brand that you're building with? That wasn't in my textbook. What can we expect from you in the future?
That's a good question. I want to expand. Like, I want to do some YouTube, both like for the history podcast and lifestyle. I think I want to show more of my personality and like talk about my background. Like I do it in interviews, but I don't think I talk about it like on my social. Like people don't know I have a bachelor's in African American studies. Like people don't know about like me going to all these Black middle school and elementary schools.
Yeah.
So just like having these elements, like I have a really cute puppy, you know, and I just want to.
You want people to know more about you.
Yeah, know more about me, and like also still keep doing history, still amplifying Black voices and Black businesses and women, but just like expanding and like having more fun on different platforms too. I think sometimes, especially with history, you can like get really niche. And I think nowadays it's like you can have like all these buckets underneath you. You don't have to like just have one focus.
Right.
And it can kind of be seamless. Like, you know, it can still connect. But yeah, I definitely want to do more stuff like that. And like even talking about the books I read, I think like I was going back to my old Instagram, like scrolling down, because I don't really erase too much except for like ex-boyfriends. And so I was like, oh, I used to share, like just finding other things that I used to share that would bring me joy and that resonated with my audience. And I was like, oh, you know, like kind of like returning to yourself. Like I think a lot of people talk about like people are like, oh, rebrand. And I literally like wrote it on Threads. I was like, is it a rebrand or is it a return to self? And like for me, I think it's just like returning to things that made me happy or things that made me happy and resonated with the community that I'm building. You know?
Okay. And then I got to make sure, I almost forgot, but the business idea that I have for you, you can take it or leave it, obviously, but we got it on record if you take it or leave it.
Is it the AI one?
Is it which one? No, not the A. Already, we already talked about that. Yeah, you could. It seemed like you might throw that one away, but it's all good. No, I was gonna say I think it would be dope if you were able to create something. Just from a naming perspective, it could be Toya's Library, or that wasn't in my textbook library, something along those lines. But then being able to essentially create a coffee table book of the podcast.
That's what I want to do, actually. That's on my list.
Look at that.
See? Yeah. I want to do a coffee table book called That Was in My Textbook, and it has like snippets from the guests, little paragraphs, like photos and stuff. Yes, we were on the same page.
Fire. Okay, I love that. So I look forward to seeing it, and I definitely will need a copy when it does come out. So
you get a first signed copy.
I appreciate that. And it's on tape as well. How can the people reach you if they want to work with you, if they want to follow your journey, they want to tap in with the podcast?
Yeah. My website is Toy from Harlem, or That Wasn't in My Textbook. I also just released today a freebie of Black-owned cafes in New York and all the boroughs.
Fire.
So you can take a look at that. And yeah, on the interwebs, Toy from Harlem, and That Wasn't in My Textbook. That's pretty much it everywhere you go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Toya, we appreciate you for pulling up to Black Fridays and being our first out-of-state guest.
I'm honored.
Thank you. It's an amazing way to start Black History Month. And everybody watching, it's definitely going to be more content to come. Make sure that you tap in with Toya and check out her content and her journey. And we appreciate y'all watching. We'll tap in with y'all soon. Peace.